I want you to think about one scenario. The US has spent more than $200 billion on military aid to the state of Israel. Think, what if this money has been spent instead on economic development and modernizing education in both Palestine and Israel? Imagine how different the outcome would really be. So spending all of this money on military aid proves that peace was never the goal. Two-state solution was never the goal, because two-state solution cannot be achieved by heavily arming $200 billion arming of one party, one of the states, to have a clear military advantage over the other one. Huge military advantage, obviously. And now, why am I mentioning modernizing education especially? Because often the media in the West especially talks about the radicalization that happens on the Palestinian side, but no one has ever talked about the extreme radicalization that happens in the Israeli society. And just look at the language of the current Israeli government. You have a prime minister that speaks of the Amalek, and anyone who knows the biblical reference knows what this means. You have ministers in a government speaking of Palestinians as animals, and speaking of nuking them, and some of them are saying that they are even worse than animals. That just gives you an idea, a flavor of how extremely radicalized the Israeli society is. Just looking at the IDF soldiers that have no problem whatsoever bombarding entire buildings, knowing that there are children and civilians that will be buried under the rubble, buried alive under the rubble. They have no problem with that. And that's a fact, because the recent report from CNN confirmed that Israel is using dumb bombs. They are not using the technology that the US made available to them, which can actually be very surgical. They can actually have and use smart bombing, but they're not using it on purpose, obviously, because they have this technology. So now that you have all of these IDF soldiers that have no problem burying people alive under the rubble, that tells you how radicalized they are, how extremist they are. So now that tells you that the Israeli society and education system is heavily radicalized. So now again, think back of the question, what if the US has spent $200 billion instead modernizing education in Israel and Palestine, and spend this money on economic development on both sides, especially Palestine, obviously, because Israel is actually a rich country. Palestine is clearly, at a disadvantage here economically, and also pushing for a real respect of the legal borders of the state of Israel, because you have 750,000 extremist settlers in the West Bank, and they are being armed by their government right now. It's just unbelievable, that this is, anyone can respect this from a state that claims to be a civil state, that they are arming extremist illegal settlers, and no one really, they're just saying, oh, you shouldn't do that, really. But, seriously, if the US also has paused its military aid to Israel with the condition of really just respecting its internationally recognized borders, just stay out of the West Bank and Gaza, that would have contributed greatly to actual peace that could have been achieved. So again, imagine $200 billion being spent on economic development, on modernizing education. What could the outcome be right now? And maybe after the first 100 billion, the US would even have not needed to spend more, because the economic development, if we spent $100 billion, the economy would have probably be self-sufficient now in Israel and Palestine, and maybe they wouldn't have even needed the rest, and the US can spend, or could have spent, this money on addressing the homelessness, or healthcare issues in the US and so on. So just think about that, and think that how much how clear that is, that peace was never really the goal, which is a shame, unfortunately.